fitna was shown at the Hudson Institute yesterday. There were pieces shown at Glenn Beck yesterday. CNN has asked for copies. We had 3 interviews on CNN today, CNN Morning America maybe, CNN International, and on a kiddie something or other show with the Blue Dogs, which is actually airing from 7 to 8 tonight. So there has been a tremendous amount of activity, mainly handed to us for free by the UK government, that most of you have probably read about. Because we all said, oh, this is terrible, but at the same time it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. Because even the Times in London said, how can the government be so stupid as to turn Geert Wilders into a martyr for this cause?
What is his name?
And that's what happened. And since then, his party has risen to the 2nd largest in Holland. And if a government, you know, if an election was formed tomorrow, he would go from 9 seats to 25. So clearly, there is a lot of popular support. And given that they go into European elections in the next 2 or 3 months, these poll numbers have a direct bearing on the amount of seats that he ends up getting in the Brussels Parliament. So this is all good news, even though it comes with a a heavy price, having to live in barracks and various other places for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. So without any more details, I think you should show fitna at high volume. Mainly because the music is from Norway.
Larry Oster is downstairs.
Good.
Do you know him?
Yes, I do.
Oh, we said he couldn't come up. So if
No, I know.
Okay, well, I don't know what to do.
Let me introduce Bjorn Larsen, who might not have introduced himself, and he's the president of the International Free Press Society.
I'm not actually, because that's Lars.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just the treasurer.
That's right, you're the contact. Okay, it's treasurer, sorry. Okay, thank you on that.
To be admitted to the country for a change. It's a good experience not being sent back. And thank you for your organization to organize this wonderful evening tonight. Indeed, what you just saw is my short film, Fitna, that got me into a lot of trouble, but I believe showed the true face of Islam. And let me tell you that the Islamization of the free West is the biggest threat to everything that we stand for. It's the biggest threat to our democracy, to our freedom, to our liberty, our dearest of our rights from every constitution that we have. And let me tell you that the biggest disease in Europe today is not only the Islamization, but is the leftish and liberal concept of multiculturalism and more especially cultural relativism. The fact that people, politically correct people, tell you that all cultures are equal, that we should hold each other's hand, sing Kumbaya together and forget about any difference. But let me tell you, this is not true. Islam is not to be compared with any other religions. It's like the brave Wafa Sultan, who is residing now here in the United States, says, if you compare our culture with the Islamic culture, it's like comparing reason with barbarity. And this is what we are facing in the West today, the influx and the growing of barbarism in our society. So the biggest problem we face today is that we have no political leaders throughout, at least Europe, and let me not talk about your country, but about my own continent. We don't have leaders anymore who tell the truth to the people, and tell them, well, we have here not a religion, we have here an ideology that is very dangerous. And I always say that you cannot really compare Islam with other religions like Judaism or Christianity or even Hinduism. Islam is a way of life, it's a way of society, it's an ideology, and it's a very dangerous totalitarian ideology. So if you should compare Islam with anything, it's not with other religions, it's with other totalitarian ideologies like fascism or communism. And this is why I also compare Islam not only with fascism, but also the Quran, which is the book, the holy book of this ideology, with Mein Kampf. Like Winston Churchill said in the 50s, he was not sued, he got a Nobel Prize when he said it. Like Oriana Fallaci, like even Schopenhauer, philosopher in the past, who said the same thing. Unfortunately, once again, we have no leadership. And our leaders, who call themselves leaders, are giving in, are giving up, are selling out. And not everybody knows, but if you look at Europe today, we have in the United Kingdom, for instance, when it comes to family law, we have already Sharia courts functioning. Today, 2009, Sharia courts in a European country. And Sharia means the end of freedom, the end of democracy, the end of everything that we really stand for. And you see that also the leaders in Europe, unfortunately, this is the good news, there is a big gap between the Vox Populi and the political elite, because you see an enormous amount of people supporting the idea that we should fight. We should fight to preserve, like yourselves, we should fight to preserve our own identity, our own culture, that we should stop with the multiculturalism and the cultural relativism. And this is something that is very good, but the leadership doesn't. The fact that I was, and Björn said it in a way of a joke, of course he's partly right, that what happened to me when it came to my trip to London might be a kind of help, but of course it's very bad that it happened. It's very bad that a country detains a member of parliament and sends him back for the only way of thinking, being critical about the Islam, because Muslim House of Lords, Muslim members of parliament were threatening to have demonstrations. So I got this letter from the UK government, very cowardly given by the driver of the British ambassador in The Hague. And it said that because of the film you just saw, Fitna, that I would be a threat to community harmony, whatever that means, to community harmony and therefore public security. This is Gordon Brown, this is the leader of Great Britain, acting not only as the biggest coward of Europe, but also like Chamberlain. Where are the Churchills of today? Chamberlain is ruling the United Kingdom today, but also in other countries. Lars Hedgaard, sitting at the back, the president of this important international free speech organization. And in his country, Lars, maybe not everybody, you can show yourself, you can stand up that people know who you are. Not everybody does. Lars Hedgaard, very important organization, the International Free Speech Organization. And in his country, like myself, journalists from the Jyllands-Posten newspaper who printed these Danish cartoons are also sued in Jordan. And the government of Denmark, Lars told me, has not even protested, like in the Netherlands. So once again, the governments are giving in. Now, it's not, of course, I'm not a criminal, and I wouldn't like to be jailed for 2 years, which could happen. But it's not about me. I lost my freedom already 4 or 5 years ago. I lived already in army barracks and prison cells and safe houses. And it's very nasty, and you don't get used to it, but you learn how to live with it. But it's not really Geert Wilders who is at trial. It's free speech that is at trial. And if we accept that I would be sentenced, then the day after my sentencing, you could be, or anybody else who is critical about Islam could be sentenced. And this is the way that the Islamic lawfare, Islamic warfare works, trying to shut people up and trying to sue them. And our governments are helping them, are not fighting them, but are helping them. So this is why we propose indeed, like Björn said before, the introduction in Europe of a kind of American First Amendment. Very important. To abolish all the hate speech that is only used against us. If in my country an imam or a radical Muslim says that gays should be thrown out of high buildings, or Israel should be wiped off the earth, or Jews should be killed, or democracy should be replaced by Sharia, they can say it. It's no problem. But if you stand up and you say, hey, this is not what we want, Islam is a threat to our freedom, you go to jail. You are being sent to prison, or at least they threaten you with that, or you're being sued. Like your own Rachel Ehrenfeld, who wrote a book, was being sued. This is the tactics that they unfortunately use. Well, what my message is, I am in a lot of trouble. I am in a lot of trouble when it comes to Jordan, who wants to extradite me and wants to get me punished for insulting Islam. I have to fight when it comes to the British decision to ban me. Even in my own country, after the public prosecutor said that I did nothing wrong and I was not to be prosecuted, the Court of Appeal decided to overrule this decision and that they should be brought to court. But hey, even 100 countries that are going to sue me will not shut me up. I am a fighter. You are fighters, and this is what we should do. We should stand up and fight and let them know that we will not accept, and let them know that there is a growing amount of people, both in the United States and in Europe, that will not let Europe, for instance, become Eurasia, that will stop the Islamization of a continent, not because we hate Muslims, but because freedom is very dear to us. And we should defend freedom, not in a defensive, but in an offensive way. Offensive way to show them that we will not accept it. That is why I made fitna, to prove, to show to the public in the world what the real face of Islam is. And trust me, Islam is not in our country or in our societies to integrate or to assimilate. Islam wants to rule. Islam wants to submit. Islam wants everything but freedom. So we should fight, and we should stand up and tell them that nobody will compromise with our dearest good, which is freedom. And if I would be allowed, I said it yesterday on Fox News, if I would be allowed to enter the United Kingdom 2 weeks ago, and I would be allowed to speak in the House of Lords, I would have reminded them to one of the giants of your own country, President Reagan, who when he visited the House of Commons in 1982, rightfully warned of the evil ideology called communism. And he was very straightforward to that. He said that if history teaches anything, has taught us anything at all, it is that self-delusion in the face of unpleasant facts is folly. And of course what he meant is that we cannot run away, we cannot ignore totalitarian ideologies that wants to destroy us. And we had communism, we had fascism, and let me tell you, Islam is even worse. So my fight is, and I hope your fight is, to stand up, to fight for freedom, not be intimidated, be offensive, whatever the price or the cost may be, because what we are fighting for is worth it. And with your support, I'm sure we will make it. Thank you very much. So, if anybody has questions or remarks or suggestions, we are also here to learn. Please.
I just wanted, I don't want to tell the whole story, but just quickly about 1999, I was working in a real estate office. This isn't the only run-in I had in Los Angeles with these people long before I knew anything about Islam. And you just don't realize that there really is a world of spiritual evil until you've looked it in the eye. And all anyone has to do is look that in the eye, and they will understand that this is a totalitarian political ideology. It has nothing to do with God. And people are so afraid to know that. But it's pure evil.
Yeah.
Pure evil.
Well, of course, it's your experience, but I can subscribe to the fact that, and I was asked today by CNN, somebody told me it's the Communist Network, we call it. I didn't know that, but they asked me more or less the same question, like, how can you say it's totalitarian or evil? And I tell them, well, look, if you don't believe what is happening, a lot of Americans don't really know what is happening in Europe. Go and visit Amsterdam. Go and visit Malmö. Go and visit Rotterdam or Brussels or Cologne. And you see that is changing, and it's changing for the worse. And what you call evil is growing very fast, and we are looking at it, and we are ignoring it totally. And if it comes to crime, when it comes to how to treat women, when it comes to respect, when it comes to violence, it's already there. Once again, we have Sharia courts in Europe. And if you are not convinced by that, go to the Middle East. I visited myself when I still could travel freely without protection and threats. I visited almost every country in the Middle East, from Iran to Iraq to whatever. And there is no Islamic or Arab, Sunni or Shia country that is not evil when it comes to the lack of democracy, the lack of freedom of speech, the lack of a civil society, the lack of human rights. So, and we are getting all the immigrants from those countries. So we are importing evilness. Once again, not every Muslim is evil. But if you are in a country like the Netherlands, where out of a population of 60 million people, 1 million people are from Muslim origin, you see the changes. And if that grows, you will see that it deteriorates for the worse. Every society, many examples where that happens, and you see that what you call evil, unfortunately, is growing a lot. And we should stop it. This is why I propose that we have a stop of the immigration from Muslim countries. This is step number one. I mean, everybody, I think, should read, if not already did, the book of Mark Stein, America Alone, and all the problems we have with demography. But besides demography, we have still mass immigration in Europe, and looking in the other direction. Millions of people coming to our continent, and they want not once again to integrate, they want to submit us. This is their sole aim. In Islam, there is no room for anything else but Islam. And this is what we should take into account. So,
why, just out of curiosity, do you draw the line, at least with O'Reilly, about deportation versus just stopping new immigration?
how do you mean, the line?
Well, because when he was asking you
Yeah.
about it, you said, no, I'm not looking to deport.
No.
Currently, just end new immigration.
Yeah. Well, I'm not in favor of deporting people who did nothing wrong. It's the mistake of our weak and cowardly government who allowed those people to come. They are to blame, not those people. They are to blame. So what we should do is stop the immigration from this country, which doesn't make it worse. But then again, we have remigration laws that people can get incentives to leave our country and continent on their own behalf. And if they commit a crime, which is not being done now, but I'm very much in favor of that, if somebody from Morocco or Turkey commits a crime, send them away, send them back. And if he has, what they often do, have a double nationality, strip them of the Dutch nationality and send them away. Give the message that if you're already there and you adhere to our values and to our laws and to our customs, which are better than yours, I mean, this must be the message, okay, you are accepted and you are equal as anybody else. But if you don't, if you have crazy ideas about Sharia, if you certainly commit a crime or do crazy things, then you should be sent away. And if we would start doing that, it would be an enormous, it would have an enormous positive effect.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Well, it seems, what you're saying is that they're using the legal system in a lot of ways against the
Yeah.
host countries.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be happening here too. Is there
It
any
is
way, yeah,
It
is there any way that to people to legally have enough training and knowledge to fight these lawsuits
Yeah.
in a productive way? In America, I remember when the Southern Poverty Law Center was very successful in fighting the Klan and a lot of really nasty neo-Nazi groups legally. I mean, they took them to court and they won because the lawyers were trained specifically to deal with it. Is there any way to get that kind of a movement going where lawyers were literally trained to deal with,
Well, this should happen, and this is happening. First, at least for Europe, we should abolish all the hate speech laws. This would have an enormous effect. Get the First Amendment, because they are using all those laws that we once implemented for totally different reasons, they are using now against us. So this would be really the first step, abolish all the hate speech laws. Then again, still things can happen. I spoke last time when I was in the United States with Rachel Ehrenfeld, and well, I'm facing now the same problems myself. They have enormous amount of power behind them, enormous amount of money behind them from all these Gulf states and Saudi Arabia and Wahhabistic or other sources, that they have unlimited resources. And what I think that we should do is not only train lawyers, but this is my way of thinking and my way of dealing with it, be offensive. Not only in the defense train, but sue them. When it's possible to do, sue them, make them crazy, make them wanting to stop everything they are doing. And that is a very tough fight. Now it's even difficult often to find knowledgeable lawyers who want to defend you, but we should train people to be offensive, not defensive, but offensive, because we are in a war. I wish it was a conventional war. In a conventional war, you see an army, you see tanks, and then people are aware, hey, we are in a war, we have to defend ourselves. It is not a conventional war. I wish it was. It's done by demographics, it's done by dimitude by our governments, and it's done by immigration. So, but it is a war. It is a war against us, against our freedom, against everything that we stand for. And if we are not start to be offensive in the most harsh way, your children, their children, your grandchildren will wake up one day and think and tell themselves, what went wrong? We lost everything that we stand for. We live in a totally different country. And I don't want our children or grandchildren to live in such a country. So be offensive, even if it means sometimes to be tougher than you normally would do. Yeah, so.
Two things. First thing, when you say be offensive, it would be better if you said be on the offensive.
This is better English.
Yes,
You're right.
because
Be
offensive
on the
otherwise is
yeah.
a whole different
I
meaning.
understand.
Secondly, this problem has been going on in the United States for a lot longer than what the movies talked about. I remember in the 1970s reading about imams in Denver being executed. Let's see, it was a burglary. The imam was murdered in his house, the house was burglarized, yet nothing was stolen. He was a moderate imam. The overtaking, the radicalization of the, if you want to call it, clergy of the Islamic phase of the mosques in the U.S. was going on at least that long, because this writer who wrote this story cited at least 4 other examples where moderate imams were being executed or killed or told to get out and they were leaving the country or whatever, so that the more radical ones could come into place. Yeah. When you say go on the offensive, wouldn't the offensive really be to try and get at the core, such as Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, where the radicalization has occurred, Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, granted, we have to go on the offensive at home as well.
Yeah. Well, first, let me give you 2 answers to that question. First, there are no moderate imams.
Well, at that time,
They don't exist. No, they never were there, and they never will be there. There might be imams that use the concept of taqiyya, that are not saying what they really think and not acting on it yet. But trust me, if there would be more of them, they would change their tune. So it's impossible to be a moderate imam. There is no moderate Islam. There is no moderate Quran. There is only a book of hate and submission. This is everything there is. There are, of course, people who call themselves moderate Muslims, but according to their own holy book, they are not Muslims. They are renegades. It says it in certain surahs and verses. So this is even not true. If you talk about Saudi Arabia, well, I'm a big friend of the United States. You can't find a bigger friend of both Israel and the United States in my Dutch parliament. But I always, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. But I also had criticism, and it's possible as a friend to have criticism, and that is about the U.S. policy towards Saudi Arabia. I never understood the U.S. policy towards, I understood it, but it was a wrong policy. Saudi Arabia, still today, before but also after 9/11, is the biggest founder of all the Wahhabistic and wrong organizations, funding mosques, funding ideological organizations, funding grassroots level organizations throughout Europe and perhaps even here. And you looked in the other direction, definitely also. You looked in the other directions for, I know, for geopolitical reasons, for economical reasons, for whatever reasons. But this gives the wrong message. And after 9/11, the Saudis, after US pressure, changed their laws. But only the loss. They did exactly the same. They even increased the support of wrong organizations. They are even now, not only in Europe, but also in the Middle East, as you know, where they before, as a Sunni country, supported Sunni organizations. They don't care anymore. They support Shia organization in a kind of competition with the other friend of us, Iran. And they are doing the same. So indeed, we should be far more tough on those kind of countries, but the world is, for selfish reasons, short-term selfish reasons, not doing that, unfortunately.
If taking that view of Islam being totally evil and stuff, what would you view as the future of Iraq?
Well, I certainly don't know what the future of Iraq will be. I don't know which way it will develop. I don't know which way most of the Arab countries develop. I know if there would be in most of the Arab countries free elections tomorrow, we will be off far worse. The Muslim Brotherhood would win in many countries, like for instance Egypt. So it's an impossible situation, because once again, not all the people are wrong, and there are people that are really wanting the best for their country and have good conceptual ideas, but as long as the Islam is dominant, it will only make situations worse. And I cannot see one Arab or Islamic country being democratic. Everybody says, well, look at Turkey. Well, Turkey is not the case. Turkey is only democratic because of the army. And these stupid Europeans say that I believe Turkey should never become a member of the European Union. It's more Islamization of the West, and we have a border on Turkey. Who would want that? Certainly the United States would not want that. And if what the Europeans are doing, as you know, to become a member of the European Union, you have to fulfill the so-called Copenhagen criteria. And one of them says that the army should be back in the barracks. And if we would do that with Turkey, it would be an Islamist country the day after that would happen. So there is, unfortunately, I see no Arab country evolving unless they denounce Islam, and they won't do that, in a democratic kind of way. So if it won't happen, a very bad thing, but let's at least protect ourselves. This is what we can do.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
I'm so
my
honored to
pleasure.
be here, I can't
Thanks.
tell you. And I want to add on to what Jill said. There's a blogger friend of mine named Baba C who wants me to send you her love. She's a really
Thank
good
you.
friend of mine. And she said something that I think is very profound and really apt in that situation. If you haven't seen the face of evil, if you haven't seen the face of Satan, it's because you're probably walking in the same direction. And I'd like to say, additional to Turkey, I've been to Turkey. I visited right after September 11th. I was on this quest. Who are these Muslims? Who are these people? I witnessed our takedown of our World Trade Center here. It was a very important experience for me. What I noticed in Turkey, what everybody talked about, oh, it's the most progressive Islamic country. It's so wonderful. You have a good time there. I saw a country in collapse. Everything was crumbling and falling apart. The only things that were shining and polished were the mosques and the police stations. And that was it. Erdogan just recently said, there is no moderate Islam, period. He said that recently. I forget where he said it. He made a public, Absolutely. there is no moderate Islam. Stop fooling yourselves. I think Turkey is a place to really watch very carefully. Now, my next two-pronged question. It's hard to predict, of course. I'm very concerned about what's happening in Europe, because any light going out in the Western world is not only bad for the United States, but bad for the world at large. What is the long view and what you see taking place if in Europe next 50 years? Because clearly they know they can outweigh us. Because we want things now, we want the war over now, we want the stimulus now, we want everything now, and everything's going to change in a nice, bright, pink package. But the Islamists, they can sit and wait for the next 1,000 years. What do you think the next 50, 100 years is going to look like? And the second prong of that question is,
I'm a prophet.
which, just
Where's
some
that crystal
thoughts.
ball?
Which countries in Europe are in the most advanced stages of Islamization, in your opinion? Which countries in Europe are in the most advanced stages
Yes.
of Islamization?
Okay. Well, I'm not a prophet. I'm happy not to be a prophet, but I know what could happen. I spoke 2 months ago at the Hudson Institute here in New York, and the theme of my speech was America as the last man standing. And I told everybody, please, look at what is happening in Europe. We need your help. What do you want? Do you want the values of Rome, Jerusalem, and Athens to be the dominant values, or the values of Mecca, Tehran, and Pakistan? What would you like? And be aware of what is happening in Europe. It might be so influential that the Americans are aware that they are losing an ally, and that if Eurabia would really be there, you will be the next. You will have lost a friend, and you will be next. So be aware of what is happening. And unfortunately, I see very few politicians here in the United States that have the sense of urgency, that see what is happening. Either I don't know of them. Either Republican or Democrat. Perhaps there are. I don't know everybody. But Tom Tancredo, I met Tom Tancredo. He was. Unfortunately, he's out of office now. That's right. But I met him in November. Sue Myrick as well. She's also very good. But it's not a majority of your parliamentarians. Well, what countries are the worst off? They all are. Maybe the least the Eastern European countries. They don't have the problem so much yet. But if you look at the Netherlands, if you look at Denmark, if you look at Sweden, not Sweden, it's terrible. If you look at the United Kingdom, if you look at France, if you look at Belgium, I mean, they are all infected by the virus called political correctness and multiculturalism. And they don't want to get rid of it. One of the reasons is that they are afraid, they are cowards, they don't want to be called politically incorrect. But also because, don't forget, the Islamization also is an enormous political force in Europe today. The amounts are that huge that if they are telling the truth, they will lose a lot of votes. That's happening today. In the Netherlands, the second biggest city, Rotterdam, the party of the Pim Fortuyn, as you know, was killed, the Dutchman, was the biggest party there. They lost the election because the socialists, the Social Democrats used the Muslim vote. And it functions. 95% of them are voting leftish. And what I said yesterday is that if Islam and liberals and left come together, it costs us our freedom. This is the worst combination ever.
We've already done that here.
Yeah, perhaps. No.
Because of the focus on the economy, the president of this country has not focused or let the public focus on Durban 2, what I call Durban 2. Durban 1 was a disaster, and Durban 2, I'm afraid, is already going in that way with our president colluding in it. I was wondering...
And Secretary of State.
Yes. Well, his whole cabinet is seething with anti-democratic people and pro-socialistic agenda. But I was wondering how the situation has come to be in Denmark and Scandinavia and the Netherlands in general, that people are turning away and not noticing the abrogation of their rights, the raping of their women, the cultural demoralization and demonization of their native cultures, and how we can get, we're all trying, but how we can get our president, God help us, to alter his Islamist swing.
There's no way.
Well, I think that there must be some way to impact on him that this is happening.
It's genetic.
He said in his book that when the
I
tide
know.
turns ugly,
He will turn with his Muslim brothers.
he will be with the Muslims.
He now pretends that he's
Yeah.
not saying
That's what he
that.
said.
Well, I can say something about Durban too and about the people, but I will not comment on your president. My major rule, I say to every journalist, my rule is if I visit a democratic country, I do not comment on politicians there. It's your job. You voted for him or somebody else.
No, we did not.
Nobody this way. Nobody this way.
It doesn't matter, but I will not say anything about any politician, except of course for Gordon Brown. I make an exception for Gordon Brown.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're right, Durban too. I think it should be boycotted. I think, at least, let me speak for my own country, the Netherlands should not go. It's considering to boycott it because it's an anti-freedom of speech, anti-Israeli package where it's terrible. I mean, I cannot understand any country going there. Well, you say, what is happening with all the people? Are they not seeing it? Well, they are seeing it. I see, and this was the good news I said in my short introduction, that in many European countries, there is a growing amount of people who are against the Islamization. Look at my own party. We took part for the first time in the general elections in 2006, and we got 9 seats out of 150. In a multi-party system, that is not bad. Today, if you look at the polls, we have 25 seats. We are the second biggest party in the Netherlands. And that's not only because people are outraged about what's happened in London and the court case, but people are fed up. And you see it in other countries as well. The problem is that we need more parties that are democratic and against the Islamization. We don't need parties like Le Pen or half-fascist parties that are growing like the British National Party in England. I mean, they are terrible. But parties like, if you allow me to say so, my own party or the Danish People Party in Denmark, which is a very respectable party, you see in those kind of countries that the people are fed up with it. The problem is, it's not 5 minutes to 9, it's 5 minutes to 12. So we don't have so much time left. But hey, we have no alternative to gather more support.
Hi, Larry Oster. I wanted to continue on a point I was thinking about at your luncheon yesterday. You mentioned several times that the main reason that you think that the Western countries are allowing this to happen is the belief in multiculturalism and cultural relativism. Now, many, many conservatives in the United States and England, maybe in Europe, I don't know about the continent, constantly denounce multiculturalism, cultural pluralism. Those same people, if you say, well, shouldn't we stop Muslim immigration? They'll say, oh, absolutely not, because we must not discriminate against anyone. So what I would suggest is that the real problem, deeper than multiculturalism, is the belief that you should never discriminate against anyone, because that is the reason why people say we cannot stop anybody from coming in. And many of the conservative writers who were at your luncheon yesterday would oppose any kind of restriction on immigration. Now, 3 years ago, I heard an editor of a prominent conservative magazine say in a small luncheon I was attending, he said, if we stopped Muslims from immigrating, we would be as immoral as the terrorists. This is a so-called conservative speaker. So I want you to understand that the problem is deeper than that easy target of multiculturalism or political correctness. Half the world denounces political correctness. It's something deeper which is shared by conservatives as well as liberals. And you see it in prominent commentators like Melanie Phillips and many others who write column after column saying that Islam is the most dangerous threat facing the West, and they never once mention the fact that the only reason that Muslims are in the West is because of immigration, and they never suggest even reducing immigration by a single Muslim per year. So it's a broader belief than a leftist belief.
But this is what I meant with cultural relativism. It's exactly, it's not multiculturalism. I'm not in favor of a monoculture. I'm not against more cultures, but I think that our culture, our own culture based on Judaism, Christianity, and humanism should be dominant. And we should acknowledge the fact that it's better than the Islamic culture. And what you're saying is true, but it is a difference between the United States and Europe. If you look once again, the difference between the Vox Populi, the popular vote, and the political elite, there is a change. There is a change going on in Europe. I hope it's not too late, and I hope those people will elect politicians that will make a different choice, because if you see in many European countries, the popular vote who would support the stop of Muslim immigration, it is huge. Even in my country, there was a real academic summit a survey that asked people, do you think that Islam is a threat to our democracy? 60% of the people in the Netherlands said yes, and again 60% of the people in the Netherlands said that the immigration from Muslim countries for the Netherlands was the biggest mistake, policy mistake by a government after the Second World War. It was #1. If you look at what the government is doing, they are doing exactly the opposite. So there is an enormous gap between what the people think and what the politicians are doing. But it's changing. And the day, and I hope you never reach that day, that in the United States you will have as much problems with Islam as in Europe, you will face the same. But I hope you are more clever and you will be a little bit sooner than we are.
I'm just wondering what your view would be on the 20 to 35-year-old Iranian.
Sorry, I don't understand.
The 20 to 35-year-old Iranian population. do you sense that there will be any, because they're dissenting in their own way, do you think there's any hope that anything can change in the picture of Iran with the younger generation of people who are dissatisfied with their religion?
Well,
30 years?
I visited Iran 3 or 4 times. Sometimes got into trouble for things I said on behalf in favor of Israel. But, and I spoke to young Iranians. We all know that almost 80% of the people is under the age of 23 in Iran. And the crazy it may sound, but those young people are not so much involved with freedom. If you ask, and I did in a park and in a university and other places, and a little bit as private as I could, what would you want? What is the most important thing you want? They want to have a job, to have an income, to feed their family, to have a house, to be able to study, normal things that everybody wants to have. Not so much, of course they want freedom, but it's not number 1 on their list. And, well, I'm not positive about Iran at all. I mean, they are very friendly people, really. It's even a very beautiful country. It's traveled all over Iran. But the regime, as you know, the Islamic regime of Iran is terrible. And I don't know what the next presidential elections will bring. I do know that between Ahmadinejad and the old Khatami, there will be not so much difference. And the dangers of countries like Iran is that at the end of the day, if, for instance, it would work, imagine one day that the people see that, which is historical, that almost every totalitarian regime that is into trouble, that if they would feel threatened internally, they would seek an enemy externally. And then not only by wording, but by deeds. So I'm afraid that once they feel trapped, that they would try to unite their own people by finding a common enemy abroad. And you know which will be the first country to be. It will be Israel. And it will not only be Ahmadinejad saying the most nasty things, he will do it. They will do it. Why? Not because of hate of Israel, which they have, but because they want to survive. So besides Saudi Arabia, Iran, and also Pakistan are the three countries of major concern that I have no solution. I would say containment. My solution will be containment, like the United States did in the past, unlike the Europeans who were in a kind of process of negotiating. Well, we all saw what happened if you negotiate with the Iranians. They are fooling you, and you cannot trust them either way. So we cannot solve the problem of democracy in the Middle East. How sad it might seem, I'm an optimist, but I don't see any solution there. What we can do is protect ourselves and be, sir, on the offense, not offensive, on the offense. Sir.
I think in the United States we're very slow to become fed up. That's one of our problems.
Yeah.
We became fed up after Pearl Harbor. We became obviously fed up after 9/11, and yet we sort of have slid into a kind of a comatose state. Everything is fine except the economy, and so we have not confronted this. In 1937, my father made efforts to get his family, me also, out of Holland.
Okay.
And no one that he tried to convince that things were starting to happen that would not be favorable to Jews, he could not convince anybody, including Otto Frank, who was Anne Frank's father.
Yeah.
How does one wake up the sleeping giant beyond another horrendous situation?
Frankly, you can't.
How does one do it in Europe? In this particular, you say that things have been changing in Europe. Slowly, people are waking up, except the politicians are not waking up.
So nothing is changing.
So nothing's changing. Can you comment on our situation here? Because we seem to be totally asleep here.
Well, no, I cannot comment so much on your situation. This is something you have to figure out yourself. But be aware. This is be aware of what is happening. Don't make the mistakes that we made. We, the so-called leaders in Europe. This is the most important hint and advice I can get. Open your eyes, see what is happening, see that you are losing an ally. Make sure you don't lose this ally, and make sure it doesn't happen to your own country. This is really the only sensitive thing I can say about it. Sorry.
Sorry. This is a multi-front battle. It's not a multi-front battle, it's a multi-front war. And it's been going on for centuries, and it will go on for decades more until there's some final culmination of loss on one side or the other. But I see most of the people speaking about this issue internationally are well over the age of 30. I don't know how many people under the age of 30 are even in this room. How do we engage the youth in Europe and the United States to get involved in these organizations, these anti-jihad organizations? They're too busy studying, or they're too busy here trying to earn a living like the kids in Iran. How do we engage them? Because that's the future, and that is our only way to win this thing.
To go to them and speak, talk to them. This is the only way. Unfortunately, in Europe, we don't even have what you have in the United States. I'm so jealous. You have this grassroots level, this grassroots organizations. At least you have them. We don't have them. We have very few, if not none at all, grassroots organization on this level. We have now Lars' Free Speech Society, which we don't even have in the Netherlands. That's why he made this Danish organization an international one. And they are nowhere so far. So talk to them, engage with them. You know, make sure that, or be aware that the sense of urgency in Europe is very short term. I remember very well after 9/11, after Madrid, after London, after the murder of Theo van Gogh in the streets of Amsterdam, the slaughter of Theo van Gogh, people were outraged for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes 48 hours. If you were lucky, it lasted a week. And then everybody was talking about buying a new car, where were you going your next holiday, and things like that. So we have to educate. We have to, I believe, also in our schooling system, we have to educate younger people. This is what I mean with talking to them, learning them, educating them, the real face of Islam. And if you look, for instance, in my country, I don't know how it's here, if you look at the school books, I mean, you cannot see anything worse than that. It's like singing Kumbaya again, but then on paper. It's terrible. It's like insulting your own culture, and it's terrible. So we should change totally our curriculum, the curriculum for the children. Make sure that they know what our culture is, what it stands for. Make sure what the dangers of Islam is. Talk to them, but it's very hard.
In the
colleges, it's very hard to achieve.
In the colleges and universities, are you getting the big money flowing in from the Saudi Arabians to fund these Middle East studies programs like we are here?
Well, not that much. Not that much, but we have. They are funding their own schools.
Their own schools.
They have. We have Islamic schools. I'm in favor of closing down immediately all Islamic schools. I mean, if you really want young children to integrate and to assimilate in a society, you should not put them on separate schools like an apartheid and fill them with young children with an ideology of hate. And this is happening. They are being brainwashed by an ideology of hate. I mean, we have children in Holland like, I don't know, 10, 12 years, this high, and they are standing in line in a grocery shop, and they are telling them, let me first, because imagine in 10 years' time, we will be in charge here.
Why can't you use
this is happening.
Why can't you use the hate speech laws that you have against them?
Well, we could. You are right, but and this would be on the offensive, but I'd rather have to abolish all this terrible hate speech laws, because at the end of the day, they are more used against us than the other way around.
But how do they get away with saying they're not violent and don't have these plans when it's all written in the Quran?
Well, for instance, we have had many lawsuits against, sometimes the public prosecutor tried against an imam who said the most terrible things in a Friday prayer. People should be killed and things like that. But he said it in a context that at the end of the day, the judge said and ruled that it was within the freedom of religion. And this means that if you are a Muslim, you can do a lot of things. And if you have no religion, or a different religion, you have a big problem. This is what is happening.
You have to found the Church of Free Speech and become a pastor.
Something like that, yes.
There you go.
Yes. Start my own church. It's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, a few minutes ago you mentioned a very popular opinion for getting rid of Muslims. So what I'm wondering, deporting them, or just resistance to their presence, what do you see as the long-term possibility of international alliances of people who are just fed up with Muslim infiltration and domination and want to push them out and back into something like where they came from? Do you see any possibility of that succeeding sometime in the future?
Well, I see it. It could happen. The first steps are happening now. I mean, Björn, Lars, myself, we are traveling around, not only talking to people like yourself, but also to politicians, to organizations, and to get more strength and to make allies. We have in June we have the next elections of the European Parliament. I'm very much against the European Union as it is today. It's almost as worse as the United Nations, but okay, it's there, so we will try to be part of it. And it would be a good thing if it would be possible that democratical, normal parties who are very much against the Islamization would join forces. Would join forces and make sure that not only in the European Parliament, but that in each European Parliament, the governments are being hassled for their policy. This would be an enormous step, but it should be done in a political way, it should be done in an intellectual way, it should be done in any possible way, on the grassroots level, it should be done in every way, and we should be, well, we should have more sense of urgency there as well. So a lot of things are possible, but we need people to do it. This is what we need. Yes, ma'am.
When you spoke of education and within your schools, with your non-Muslim, do you have the problems that are here with the textbooks being rewritten and history being rewritten? So in trying to educate, we're also dealing with history that's being rewritten?
Yeah, well, rewritten in a way that it's full of lies. It's full of lies about it's not about reality. It's about when it comes to immigration, when it comes to multiculturalism. It's like reading a book of a Green Left Party or something like that. It's like a multicultural fairy tale. And this is what our young children are being taught. This is how they come home. This is how they, I mean, it's terrible.
So you are having problems with whoever's writing the textbooks?
Yes, and we have a lot of problems in order to change it. It's very difficult to get in a parliament a majority who is outraged. The public is often outraged. We get so many letters from people who say, well, my child came home today and next week they have to visit a mosque, and they got a leaflet about the mosque and it's full of crap. Right. Excuse the word, it's full of that, and they have to do it. And it's impossible to change it, but we have to keep fighting against it. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard, but apparently our president is going to take 20 million of our tax dollars and use it to ship hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Palestine, from the Gaza, from here to live here. And aside from that, he's giving 900 billion more to them to rebuild.
Yeah.
900 million.
Well, once again, I'm not commenting on what your government is doing.
But just to let you know where it's going.
Yeah, but we make the same mistake. Let me phrase it like that. So I don't know about your government. I know, but I'm not commenting on that. But we are. I mean, make sure that Hamas is a terrorist organization. How can we spend 1 penny on the Palestinian Authority? They are thugs. They are non-democratic, corrupt, violent terrorists. I want nothing to do with them. I would not spend 1 penny on them. Let them clean up their own country. And this is what we should do. And unfortunately, this is not happening because we feel guilty. One last question, and then I give the floor to Björn. Ma'am.
I had read pretty recently about the Prime Minister of Australia. I don't know if it was Crett Howard, that he basically was like, you know what?
He was the Prime
Minister. You know, you're not going to dictate to us anything. You accept our way of life. We're a Christian country. And like, it got very little play. But it was very courageous as a model, you know, for other countries to look to, that Australia as a continent and a country is doing it. You know? And they're a democratic country and they're not afraid to do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
He lost you.
It goes all over the internet. This speech of the former Prime Minister Howard. And this is one of the exceptions of people who are telling the truth. I mean, just if you talk about Islam, you see You show them the real face. You're telling the truth. You're not making anything up. And this is what we should do. And Prime Minister Howard was very brave to do that. Unfortunately, in the Netherlands, we have a Prime Minister that is a very big coward, who is not even complaining, for instance, to the Jordanians or to the British for what happened to me. He tells me in Parliament, it's your problem, it's not mine. So we need more leaders like that.
How about the royal family?
How about?
The royal family?
British
The
royal.
In the Netherlands.
Oh, the Dutch royal.
Now it's very...
Is
well,
Queen Beatrice still alive?
Of course she is. Yes, she's still alive.
I haven't seen her in 30 years. So.
Okay. Well, I will tell her to contact you. No, she's very alive. Thank you very much.